welcome back to another episode of Walk-On Redshirts podcast. It's officially August, which means we've got football coming in this month. If you're not doing so already, make sure to follow us on social media. Make sure to like, rate, and subscribe to the podcast. We've got Mitch from 3 Tech Podcast this week. I appreciate you joining us this week, Mitch.
Yeah, hey guys, glad to be on. We've had both of you guys on our podcast over at 3 Tech, and happy to return the favor and talk some ball here tonight.
Yeah, well, William talked for like 45 minutes, and I actually kept mine to what the time limit you wanted. So we'll meet somewhere in the middle between what we promised you and how long William talked. So we'll meet somewhere in the middle of the night.
Perfect. I love it. I can't wait for it, guys. Talking season's almost done. I feel like we've been previewing conferences and teams for an eternity, but it doesn't mean I'm any less excited to talk these teams, to dive into the details. I'm as excited for this season as I think maybe I've ever been. I don't know if that's the 12-team playoff or conference realignment, but man, I've been sucked in this past off season, and I'm really happy to be here.
Yeah, this week we are jumping into the SEC, similar to how we did with the Big Ten. We're splitting into two. There's just too many storylines, too many teams, too many players to talk about, and nobody wants to listen to a 5-hour podcast. So we're going to jump in and talk about the SEC. We're going to do the Western half because there are no more divisions in the SEC, but we're making our own, and we're doing the Western half just because it tends to flow a little bit better together. And the first thing we have to talk about with the new SEC are the new players that are coming in. Texas and Oklahoma joined the SEC this year, leaving the Big 12. Monumental movement. Nobody saw this coming when it first was originally announced. And now we've got the Longhorns and the Sooners joining, Texas A&M, Alabama, LSU, Georgia, Florida, Tennessee, some very historic programs. And Mitch, I want to toss it over to you first. Out of these two teams that are coming to the SEC, who do you think it's bigger for the program?
Boy, that's a good question. I think that's an interesting way you phrase that, because initially I want to say Texas, right? It puts them back at the forefront of every national storyline possible. No longer are they the kings of the Big 12, where Texas might be a really good team, but gosh, the conference just kind of sucks around them. That was certainly the storyline for a couple of years, and it set Texas up for some massively underachieving seasons, right? But I'm going to say Oklahoma, because I think Oklahoma now gets put on the same stage as these other playoff contenders that they've lost to in the past couple of seasons. It really turns the heat up on Brent Venables, the ability for him to recruit, which Oklahoma does at a great level. But I think the spotlight is going to be so much brighter on Oklahoma. At the end of the day, even when Texas was going 5-7, they're still the University of Texas. They still get a plethora of headlines. Their recruiting almost never drops off. Oklahoma, though, I feel like if things get away from them at any point, which I don't know that it necessarily will, I think the repercussions might really hurt. But coincidentally, or on the other side, if they're able to overachieve this year against a brutal schedule, suddenly I feel like that train is rolling, and it's really hard to stop Oklahoma when they've got the juice.
William, your guy Brent Venables over there, we're talking about him. I know that you are one of the biggest Brent Venables supporters that are out there right now, Clemson guy. What do you make of him making that move to the SEC now? I mean, they knew that this was coming when they hired him, but now it's time to put pen to paper. It's time to play ball on the field, and we've got Sooners playing a really tough schedule this year.
Yeah, and I think it's the perfect move at the perfect time. So all this conference realignment, along with the coaching carousel that happened over there in Norman, happened at the perfect time. Lincoln Riley leaving to go to USC opened the door for Brent Venables to come back, and then Brent Venables is a quintessential SEC coach. I mean, he comes with intensity. He recruits at a high level. He's embracing NIL. He's embracing the transfer portal. He's doing all the things that all these other coaches are doing in the SEC. He's funded by the SEC conference. He's got a big program in Oklahoma. He's got Oklahoma ties. Like this couldn't have been more perfect. Had he not had the season he had in his first year, I think people aren't talking with. I don't think there's any question marks for Brent Venables had his first year not happened. But people don't realize a lot of people left. I mean, Caleb Williams being one of them. left when Lincoln Riley left. So he kind of had an empty cupboard when he started at Oklahoma, and he's already turned it into a prominent team. I mean, they compete with anybody, and we're going to find out what they're made of this year because, like y'all said already, they have one of the toughest schedules in the SEC. I know they face Texas. I'm pretty sure they face Georgia. They got Auburn.
They actually don't face Georgia. They get Texas, Missouri, Alabama, LSU, Tennessee. South Carolina is also in there.
And they go to South Carolina, which is no, they don't.
They go to Auburn, to Mississippi, to Missouri, to LSU, which are obviously 4 difficult games, and they play Texas at the Texas State Fair in Dallas.
Right.
And with Oklahoma, one of the big question marks this year is the quarterback position because Jackson Arnold was very highly touted as a quarterback coming out of high school. I believe he was one of like the Gatorade Player of the Year, one of those awards for the high school player of the year. Dylan Gabriel leaves before the bowl game, so we do get to see Jackson Arnold in a bowl game. I am not one that takes bowl games super serious because it's one game. It's a very isolated game, and it's hard to say that is going to translate to a full season. Mitch, love to hear your thoughts on what you think to expect out of Jackson Arnold this year. Is the bowl game something that we're going to expect to see? Do you think we're going to see a different style of offense? This is a very different schedule and a different year that they're going to be expecting, but I really think they're just going to go as far as Jackson Arnold can take them.
Well, he's set up to succeed. And I say this as someone who covered him in high school, Denton Geyer, quarterback back in the day. And his arm is undeniable, right? He's got a cannon. He can throw it a country mile. In fact, William, the thing that I'm most looking forward to is what you talked about with Cade Klubnik on our podcast the other night, how he develops mentally. Now, we haven't really seen what he can do, how he's going to diagnose the defense, his ability to make reads and command that offense the way we saw Cade do it over the course of a full season. But for me, he's going to be behind an offensive line that is talented, yes, but is replacing 4 or 5 starters. New offensive line coach and Bill Bedenbaugh that's coming in. I know Oklahoma fans believe he walks on water. I'm not arguing that, and his skins are definitely on the wall. But it's a new unit that's going to have to take some time to gel. The wide receiver core is as talented as you're going to find in the country, and he's got a talented running back core as well. So the pieces are all around him. For me, the difference is going to be what's between the ears for Jackson Arnold. I think he's going to take his lumps early, and that schedule does not allow very many ramp-up periods for a young quarterback. So the physical giftings are there. Really, it's just going to be, hey, when you're getting blitzed nonstop, how do you step up and respond? That's what I'm most curious to see from Jackson Arnold and the Sooners this season.
Yeah, and just to add on to that, Mitch, the very first couple of weeks, because he's so green, you're going to see a lot of different pressures. You're going to see a lot of disguises. You're going to see a lot of things. Coaches are going to throw, everything but the kitchen sink at him. So he's going to have to learn. He's going to have to learn quick. But yeah, like you said, he's got talent around him that can help him grow and develop and to become what he needs to get to, which you'd hope you see that by the end of the year. I wouldn't expect to see it the first 3 games. But towards game 4, 5, and 6, I expect to see some big growth from Jackson Arnold.
Well, I mean, they're going to lose the first game to Temple. I mean, we already know that. I mean, my alma mater is just going to go down to Norman. We're going to take that game on Friday night, and then we're going to finish 1-11.
Temple talk is back, baby.
We always work away in this. We're on the schedule. Somebody posted that we're going to go 0-12 this year. No, we're going to start 1-0, and then we're going to lose the next 11. Get it right.
That was college football home, and
it was.
Shame on them.
Not very happy with that. Not very happy. We're going to win at least one this year. It's going to be Oklahoma. I'm going to be on a super high note saying we're going to make the college football playoff, and then we're going to lose every other game. Can't wait. So Oklahoma takes an easy transition. Texas makes the college football playoff. Go down to the wire with Washington. Has a chance at the very end of the game to end up in the national championship. If it wasn't for an injury on Washington's running back, that gives them extra timeout, gives Quinn Ewers a chance to drive down the field. They have a chance to win the game, or I forget what the actual score was, but they have a chance to go in the end zone, fall short. one of the biggest issues for Texas last year was the secondary. And this year they are also losing some key playmakers. They had a very lethal wide receiver core last year. Mitch, do you think that Texas is going to be able to make the replacements to get back to that level? I mean, replacing a Xavier Worthy isn't super easy, especially when you've got a bunch of guys that I don't want to say aren't proven. Isaiah Bond, played a lot for Alabama last year, but you don't have those three guys they had last year that were just blowing people out of the water.
It's interesting because offensively, I think Texas is going to be fine. Now, as we found out literally moments before we hit record on this, CJ Baxter went down in fall camp today with a knee injury. We don't know the severity of it. We just know that he's down and he's hurt and might miss some time. So kind of watch this space to see what ends up happening with Baxter. Texas has a deep running back room. Jaden Blue, I think, would be the next guy up. The wide receivers, I feel pretty good about with who they brought in. You mentioned Isaiah Bond coming over from Alabama. You've got a guy like Silas Bolden who comes from Oregon State, Matthew Golden from Houston. They're going to be lightning fast on offense. Jonte Cook is a 5-star athlete who's going to get his chance to shine out wide, I think, this year for Texas. And the offensive line has over 120 starts coming back to protect Quinn Ewers, right? What I'm concerned about is the defense, specifically that front four. You lost the heart and the soul in your two outstanding defensive tackles last season. While I think Texas is generally a deep team up front, it will be interesting to see if they regress statistically. They were so above the norm last year in pass rush, in rush defense, and overall defensive efficiency. This year, I wonder if that takes a little bit of a step back. We'll see what the secondary does. I know they've been kind of much misaligned over the past few years, mostly because they give up a whole lot of yards. I love the talent in that secondary, but honestly, if I'm looking for one area of regression for the Horns, somewhere that they might be beaten regularly against the Georgias, against the LSUs, it's up front along that defensive line.
Yeah, I have to agree with that. And just to add to that wide receiver core, Ryan Wingo, another 5-star that they got out of the 2024 class. I think he's going to be a phenomenal football player. And then, they tried to address the defensive back room by getting Andrew Makuba out of Clemson. And then I'm forgetting the guy's name. Cole is his last name, out of San Jose State. Javion Cole.
No, you're right.
And, but I don't know what that does for you. You're going to the SEC. You're going against 5-star, blue chip players at the outside. You bring him in to be the field corner, he's going to get a lot of work. Texas's Achilles heel last year was their pass defense. I expect to see a little bit more of that this year. You would hope maybe that you equate some of that to the Big 12 and just being in a very pass-happy conference last year. A lot of the teams they played just, throws the ball almost exclusively. You don't get that as much in the SEC. So maybe you'll see it come down a little bit, but I still expect their pass defense to be below average.
One player I think to watch, he was a transfer from UTSA, was Trey Moore. Had 14 sacks last year for them. But we've seen that this translation from Group of 5 to Power 5 isn't always a apples to apples comparison. You have guys like Jared Verse who come from Albany that go to Florida State and end up great. But then there's plenty of stories that we have that guys were phenomenal at a G5 school, go to this Power 5 or go to the SEC, and you don't see the same impact. If he had 14 sacks, he ends up only with like 6 or 7, and you go, where did all that go? Well, the talent is better. It's tougher to go against SEC tackles than it is to go against the American Athletic Conference. So I'll be interested to see how they use him.
Yeah, well, right now, according to our lads, they have him slotted at the Sam linebacker position, so not necessarily where you're going to be rushing the edge a lot. I'm going to be very curious to see if they're going to be blitzing him a lot, using him in passing downs, or if he's trying to just develop his game and be more of a 3-down linebacker who can, play in pass coverage and also run stopping. So I'm curious to see why they would do that.
And we're going to learn a lot about Texas early in the year. Week 2, they travel up to Ann Arbor and play Michigan. Now, this obviously isn't the same Michigan team as last year. This would have been nearly a rematch if Texas had beaten Washington. But Michigan is not going to be a slouch. They're not going to be, a 5-win team. Like, they're still projected to win, anywhere from 8 to 10 games this year. They're going to play physical football. How does Texas match up when they do play that? Because Michigan is going to run out 6 offensive linemen at some point. They're going to just run the ball down the throat. We've seen them where they just want to try to rely on Donovan. They're going to try to rely on Donovan Edwards as much as they can. And that's going to be very important, especially that defensive line that we're talking about. Are they going to be able to hold up? They played Georgia later in the year. We know what Georgia likes to do. I know they have Carson back, but Georgia, there's a reason they always have a stable of running backs. They're going to be trying to run the ball. So those 2 games, we're going to learn a lot. And the thing is, with the playoff, they could lose both those games and very easily be in the playoff. They could still easily be an 8, 9, 10 seed without question at 10-2.
Yeah. What's crazy too, sorry, Mitch, but what's crazy too is I could see Michigan beating Texas and then Michigan not making the playoff and Texas making the playoff. Like, I don't think that's a crazy scenario because Michigan just matches up perfectly with what Texas does. Like you said, Michigan's got that physical style of offense and defense, but Michigan also they aren't slouches in the back end. I mean, Will Johnson is one of the best players in the country, let alone defensive back. So that's going to be must see TV. I'm excited to watch that game.
I agree. I think a very fun game.
I think that matchup, the Michigan secondary against the Texas wide receivers, that's going to be must-see TV.
Yeah.
So, want to move over to the rivalry game that we haven't had in forever. Now, Texas A&M. So, Texas A&M, obviously, the Mike Elko era has arrived in College Station. Jimbo Fisher obviously got that ridiculous contract. The A&M boosters buy him out. There was a second that we weren't sure who the head coach was going to be. And then they finally decided that Mike Elko was going to be the head coach after almost bringing in Mark Stoops from Kentucky. I want to hear what your thoughts on that, Mitch. Were you ready to have Mark Stoops in at College Station, or were you one that was like, no, absolutely not. We need somebody better than that?
Yeah, I didn't think, similarly to how the A&M baseball head coach search went, I didn't think that Mark Stoops was a guy that would gel with the fan base and kind of gel with the brand of Texas A&M. I think Stoops does a tremendous job where he is at Kentucky for so many reasons. But here, I just didn't know heading into a year where you're going to be recruiting and playing head-to-head against Texas. I didn't know if Stoops was going to be enough of an upgrade to make any real waves, right? Mike Elko is not a sexy head coaching pick, but my goodness, the man can coach defense. And as someone who was there and covered A&M athletics during the Elko era of as a defensive coordinator, it was fun to watch the Aggies fly around and play defense, right? I mean, he brought back the Wrecking Crew moniker that hadn't really existed since the late 90s, early 2000s. So the man knows how to coach defense. He's going to step out of the way on the offensive side, let Colin Klein, who comes over from Kansas State, truly have free reign there. That was the biggest issue with Jimbo Fisher's tenure at Texas A&M was the offense was slow, it was complicated, and a lot of the problems went back to Jimbo not letting other people do what they did best, right? Like Arkansas, it feels like gets a diamond in the rough with Bobby Petrino coming back, and Petrino said in all the interviews after being rehired in Fayetteville, yeah, like I didn't really get to do much at A&M because Jimbo wanted to have his fingerprints all over the offense. I think that was ultimately his downfall. And I think taking that away, letting the proper cooks be in their proper kitchen will be a huge step up for Texas A&M. And I think no matter what their record is this year, I think they're on a path that is sustainable and will be successful recruiting and on the field.
Anybody who can win 8 games at Duke is a phenomenal football coach.
Amen. You're here.
And I was very impressed with what Mike Elko was able to do with the Blue Devils. Obviously, what they did to us in that Week 1 game was just
Does that still hurt? Does that still hurt you?
Even though we did it more to ourselves, but I'm not going to get into that. You can go listen to the 3 Tech Pod to go listen to what I had to say about that. Yeah. But I will say, like, if Connor Wegman can stay healthy, I think that gives them a really, really good shot to be competitive. I don't see Texas A&M competing to win the SEC championship this year, but I do see them playing spoiler. I do see them being in every single game that they play in. I don't see many teams blowing them out of the water because it's not like they don't have a stable of talent there. And one of my favorite players in college football right now is Moose Muhammad. Not only does he have the greatest first name on the planet, and he comes from a great pedigree. I think he's a really good playmaker. And I think he gets overlooked a lot. And I think this could be his coming out year if he gets healthy quarterback play for the entire year. So I'm curious to see what Texas A&M's identity is. And I think I might be able to start liking Texas A&M again. I didn't like them when Jimbo was there because I can't stand Jimbo Fisher. So everywhere he goes, like right now, I don't like the coaching vacancy island that he's living on. That's my least favorite team. I just can't stand everything he does. So I do like Mike Elko. I think Texas A&M is building in the right direction. And I think, like you said, he's not the sexiest guy, but he's the best guy. And that's what you want.
What do you think is the biggest flaw in this year's A&M team, Mitch?
Probably the offensive line. I don't know that it's a flaw necessarily. I think it's going to be inexperience and a lack of time together. Very similar to my issue with Oklahoma. Chase Bisontis is going to slide over to left guard, which is a great move. Last year he was supposed to play right guard and did for a little bit, and then an injury forced him out to right tackle, and he got exposed. He's not a tackle; he's a guard. He said in his press conference, I think yesterday, I want to be with the heavy guys inside. And so helping in the run game, helping protect Connor Wegman's blind side from that left guard spot, I think is going to be great. They're still trying to figure out who the center is, whether it's the Utah transfer, Mark Naboo, who was a recruit from the state of Washington. I think Trey Zune as the left tackle is going to be, an All-American type left tackle, but at the right guard spot and at the right tackle spot, I think there's enough of a question mark, whether it's Cam Dewberry, whether it's the transfer from Kansas, Armej Adam, or I can't remember his last name. Played well for the Jayhawks. Say that again.
Or Reed Adams, excuse me.
Yeah, Reed Adams. Played great for the Jayhawks last year. And then Ruben Fothery, who's a mountain of a man at right tackle. He's just been a little unpolished his entire career. So curious to see how they all blend together. If Wegman stays healthy, the kid is as talented, I truly believe, as any quarterback in the country. Again, another guy that I covered in high school. He's got a wicked arm. He's very, very smart, and he has a quick release. And that's something that Texas A&M and specifically Colin Klein's offense needs to succeed. They've just got to keep him upright. In those first 2 years under center, his offensive line played like Swiss cheese. I mean, last year he was off to a great start, and an unblocked safety in the Auburn game breaks his leg and ends his season. It's those kind of free shots you've got to keep off your quarterback if the Aggies are going to stay healthy and with Connor Wegman under center win 8-9 games this year.
I'll tell you what you need to do, Mitch. You need to call up Mike Elko and Colin Reed and say, listen, I need Theo Mellon Orstrom to play significant snaps at tight end. I need to see the Swedish meatball out there just dominating. So this guy is from Stockholm, Sweden, the land of my people. He's tight end. He's 6'6", 250. Probably has no idea about anything with football. I want to see this dude play some football. He looks like an athletic freak, and I would love to see him get some snaps.
He's looked great. Looked great in spring ball. Has looked really good in fall camp from everything that I've read. The tight end room is like 6 guys deep, and that's with Donovan Green coming off of an ACL tear from last year. So I think the Swede is certainly going to get some playing time, as are 3 or 4 other guys.
One thing that I'm looking for with A&M is we all remember that explosive class with the defensive line where they brought in like 8 guys that were like the top 100 recruits. Obviously, a couple of them have left now, guys like Anthony Lucas and Walter Nolan, but there are still a lot of those guys who were top-ranked players. You still got guys like Shamar Stewart. You still got guys like Gabriel Brownlow, Dindy, and Nay White. Like, there's still a lot of guys that were either 5-star or fringe 5-star defensive linemen, and they're heading into their junior season now. This is where they need to make that jump. And guys that were like top 10 prospects like Shamar Stewart, I'm looking for them to have their breakout year. I'm looking for them to have an 8-sack season and really make impacts in some of these big games. It's time. They were 5-star players for a reason. This can really help the A&M team, when you have an explosive pass rush like they should, then that can completely change the whole defense and completely change the game and changes the game plan. So I'm excited to see what some of these guys can do now that they're into their third season. And hopefully we get to see some explosive plays out of some of them.
I think you're going to see that, especially with Nick Scorton coming in to play one defensive end spot, coming over from Purdue. He's a Bryan kid. Jimbo Fisher told him you're too small to play in the SEC, so he went and put on a bunch of weight, led the Big Ten in sacks last year, and now comes home to play for the Maroon and White. I agree. The pass rush is the key to Mike Elko's defense, and, it is time. This defensive line, in large part, has underperformed since that heralded 5-star class. This is the year that guys like Shamar Turner, Shamar Stewart need to take that next step. They're healthy. They absolutely should in this scheme. So I agree. If the Aggies are winning, if they can pull an upset over Notre Dame, if they can beat Missouri at home early on, I think the pass rush is going to be a big storyline in those kind of games.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So one of the other considered rivals for A&M, LSU. Obviously, Jaden Daniels is gone, Heisman Trophy quarterback. They were explosive on offense. They had a ton of talent on the offensive side of the ball. They couldn't stop a nosebleed on defense. Now, this year's a little bit different. You don't have Jaden Daniels back there as your saving grace that when you need to play, he's going to make it. This year's a little bit different. We got Garrett Nussmeier going back there. And honestly, he's relatively unproven. William, what are you looking for out of Nussmeier this year to prove that he can be the guy and LSU could make a run at the playoffs?
I need to see him be able to score at the same clip as Jaden Daniels, and I don't see that happening for them to make the playoffs. Although LSU did address some of the defensive woes by going out and replacing a lot of the coaches in there, and I'm blanking on some of the names right now, but they didn't
Blake Baker.
Blake Baker. But they didn't do enough in the transfer portal and recruiting to replace that. However, they do have one of the best defensive players in the country in Harold Perkins still on that team. I would pray to God that they don't put him back at middle linebacker and make him play completely out of position and remove his skill set from the game completely. I think that changes a little bit in terms of their pass defense. But other than that, we don't know what we're going to get because you don't know how many people were playing out of position last year because of that. I'm not high on LSU this year, or as my son calls them, my son saw a highlight video of them yesterday and said they look like mustard. So this is now the mustard team to me. That's grade A analysis for my 3-year-old. And so mustard is going to struggle on defense. I think you're going to get a little bit of an increase because you've got a lot of the guys coming back. I think you only have 2 transfers that are replacing people on the defense, but you have a new coaching staff. So you can't teach them to be faster, stronger, better, but you can teach them to be in better position. You can put them in better position.
You can teach them to be better.
I don't know why I said better. You can teach them to be, after I said that, I literally started talking about how you could teach them to be better. You could put them in positions to win. You can get them in more favorable matchups, but you can't make them faster or stronger. I don't think that's an issue with those guys, but I don't see that big of a leap. And then, you know what? You asked me about the quarterback, and I start talking about the defense. That's how big of an issue that is with that team right now.
The defense was terrible. I mean, they played well at times, but it was against really bad teams. Like, you shout out Army, congrats. They run the triple option. Yeah. But you lose to Ole Miss 55-49. If you score 49 points, there's really no reason that you shouldn't win a game.
Yeah, and then if you're new to this show, you just got to experience a William rant of the ages. So Jake asked me a question. I will end up
William
in left
doesn't
field.
answer it.
I did not answer it. I briefly answered it, and then I focused on something completely different. So apologies if you don't like that. Hopefully you do.
You're probably a 4-star listener, not a 5-star listener.
That's right. Garrett Nussmeier.
The Moose talks about what the Moose wants to talk about.
The Moose gets loose. To rein it back in, to rein this moose back in, make him a reindeer. Garrett Nussmeier, you don't have the running ability. So I see a massive amount of explosive plays taken away. I don't know off the top of my head, but I know it's more than 10 or 15, 20-plus yard runs that Jaden Daniels had last year. You lose that completely, and Nussmeier is not running anywhere. So you're changing. The offense is going to look entirely different. So I think you go from I think their ceiling is 8 wins. I really do. Like I'm not very high on LSU on Mustard this year. Excuse me.
What are you thinking, Mitch? What do you think the ceiling is for LSU, and is Garrett Nussmeier going to be able to take them, up to that height?
I think Nussmeier is a very capable quarterback. He's got a veteran offensive line in front of him, which is really going to help. And I know everybody wants to focus on the stud wide receivers being gone, right? I totally get that. But CJ Daniels comes in from Liberty, right? Kyron Lacey hadn't really established himself at LSU in the past, but he's been behind some of the biggest horses in this game over the last couple of seasons. So I think the talent is there. I think they very much got to prove themselves as well. But William's right. The running element that Jaden Daniels brought to that team, it's going to look different this year, right? He was one of only 2 quarterbacks in the country that threw for over 3,000 yards while also rushing for 1,000 yards. The other one is my personal pet cat, Byron Brown at South Florida. So inherently, their offense is going to look just a little bit different, right? For me, though, the key is, like he started talking about, the defense. The defensive line, they have so many talented bodies in that front 7. And as long as Harold Perkins is playing off-ball linebacker, they're going to be fine at stopping the run. My concern is that secondary. Nobody in that secondary has proven themselves at all to be an SEC caliber defensive back with any sort of consistency. I think probably the best name back there is Major Burns, and he's been inconsistent at best. So LSU couldn't stop the pass last year. I wonder if they're not going to be able to do that again. I think Blake Baker gets that defense on track eventually, but I don't know if 2024 is the year that leaves Tigers fans feeling really confident about that defense.
One notable thing is they do bring back Corey Raymond. Now, he wasn't phenomenal when he left to go to Florida, but we all remember when he was at Nebraska or at LSU in those 2015 to 2020 and those defensive backs that he put into the NFL.
Sure.
There were tons of great guys. Now, some of those guys were very highly recruited guys, but that doesn't mean that these guys don't have the talent there. I don't know if it's going to happen in year 1, like you said. Yeah, I think Corey Raymond, he's been away from LSU for a couple of years. These aren't his guys anymore. That doesn't mean he can't coach them up. Doesn't mean that they cannot play the same style of defense that he's used to. But it wouldn't shock me if there is a year or 2 to get back to that level. And the other thing about LSU that gives me a little bit more of a upbeat feeling about them is this schedule. I look at the schedule, and there isn't a game in here where I go, yeah, that is 1,000% a loss. Like Alabama to me is probably the one game where I look and go, yeah, it's probably a loss, but you get them in Death Valley. So it's a little bit different feeling there. You go on the road to A&M. That's going to be a tough game. You play USC in Las Vegas. For all intents and purposes, I doubt that USC has their fans show up. It's probably going to be just whoever is in Vegas that weekend. And other than that, I don't look at this and go, wow, like this schedule is impossible. Now they could lose 4 games out of this without question, but I could also see them going 10-2 without question as well, because there's so many question marks with each one of these teams. We talked about A&M, but what happens if Connor Wegman, struggles? What happens if he doesn't play the top visibility and he's not able to take advantage of that LSU defense? What happens if Alabama does struggle? What happens if that Kalen DeBoer the first year just isn't off and running? What happens if Jackson Arnold isn't the savior that Oklahoma is looking for? He's a really good quarterback, but he's not the savior that they think he is. Other than that, there's not. And then you have Ole Miss, and who knows what Lane Kiffin does this year? Nobody actually knows what Lane Kiffin's ever going to do. But then they get games like Arkansas, Vanderbilt, UCLA, South Alabama, South Carolina, Nichols. Like those games should all be wins. There's no reason they shouldn't win most of those games. So I could see them with this schedule making the playoff just because it does feel like it could be on the easier side, but also wouldn't shock me if it ends up being ridiculously tough either.
I think for me, the danger zone for LSU is the trio of at Texas A&M, Alabama, and at Florida. They haven't beaten the Aggies in Kyle Field since the Obama administration. To be honest, I don't expect that to change. The Aggies have handled the Tigers in Kyle Field for quite some time. My last game as a student was that famous 7 overtime game, so I kind of
Ooh,
personally invested in keeping that winning streak going. Florida, listen, we don't know what they're going to look like by the end of the season. They could truly be the walking wounded after just being bashed on the rocks of the hardest schedule in college football history. But as Tennessee found out last year, going to the swamp is no easy task. So I think if there's ever a losing streak for LSU, it's somewhere in that 3-game stretch. But like you said, Jake, this team is talented, and there's enough question marks around the conference that absolutely, if LSU went 10-2, even 11-1, I don't know that I'd be surprised. I'm just not going to predict it right now.
yeah. And Florida, the point there is, are they going to be playing like the season's over, or are they going to be playing with nothing to lose? Because if Billy Napier does get fired at some point, all you need is an assistant to come in with a fiery personality, and they do the whole Dabo Sweeney and take over and then never leave. So you never know if a couple wins for a Florida team like that just generates some excitement. And, the coaches are be coaching for their job at that point. The players understand that they're, whether they're trying out for that team or the other future team, you just never know what you're going to get out of a team like that. So I agree that while I don't think Florida's going to be very good, that late in the year, you don't know what you're going to get out of a team, and you're just going to get their best shot. We've seen upsets way crazier than LSU going on the road to Florida at the end of the year and being a loss. Let's move over to Missouri. This Missouri team last year was a very interesting team. There's a lot of talent on that team. They lose Cody Schrader, who was arguably one of the most underrated running backs in the conference, and not only the conference, really the country last year.
As a walk-on.
Yeah, as a walk-on. If nobody heard, he was a walk-on. Had to mention that. But they bring back arguably the best wide receiver in the country in Luther Burden. And Brady Cook is, to me, an underrated quarterback by my standards. I don't know nationally. Sometimes he's viewed very highly, than other times he's completely forgotten about. But Luther Burden, to me, is an outstanding wide receiver. And to me, by the end of the year, I think you could be looking at him like another Marvin Harrison Jr., guy who's going in the top 5 of the NFL draft. And just that absolute playmaker, similar to how Ohio State just used Luther Burden and would win games. I think there's a chance that Missouri just figures out that, hey, get the ball to Luther Burden and we're going to win games. What do you think, Mitch?
I think Missouri is another interesting potential half team this year, because with the departure of Blake Baker is important, because remember, just a couple of years ago, Mizzou was one of the worst defenses, not only in the country, but in college football history. They were giving up just gargantuan yards per play. They couldn't get a stop on third down. It was impossible to watch Missouri defensively and leave feeling hopeful. The offense is going to go, I think, with the best in the country. And you mentioned all the reasons why. I think they've got some nice pieces in the running back room, right? Nate Newell comes in, Marcus Carroll comes in. So I think they're going to be able to run the football. The offensive line looks very, very solid as well. And those wide receivers are stout. For me, again, it's like LSU. It's like, a bunch of other teams in this league. What do you get from the defense? The secondary, I'm actually pretty confident in. I like some of the guys that they took out of the transfer portal, but they were so good defensively last year. They lose the architect of that defense. And now I'm wondering, okay, you've got Corey, what's his name, Batoon coming in. How does he pick up the baton and continue to run with it when Missouri is finally having all of these expectations put on them? Teams have to learn to win. This Missouri team seemingly has learned some of those early lessons, but now can they deal with the expectations?
Yeah, sustained success is the hardest success. I mean, you see a lot of coaches flame out very early. You talk about Gus Malzahn over in Auburn. You think of Ed Orgeron over in LSU. It's really, really hard to keep winning. So does Eli Drinkowitz, is the culture he's instilled there produce sustainable winning, consistent winning? Well, and he's got a little bit of that Dabo culture over there with Torino Pride Jr. and Joseph Charleston in that defensive backfield. So it's essentially Clemson's defensive backfield. But I'm curious to see what that defense does as well. I think the difference between LSU and Missouri is that Missouri's offense will be able to take off more pressure. Missouri's defense is more capable than LSU's defense was last year. And Missouri is also going to be able to, their offense is also going to be able to take some pressure off that defense. They're not going to have to stop the offense every single time. And you know, you just have to go out there and pin your ears back and play ball. Like it's the game is not on the line. The game is not in the defensive hands. You know, Luther Burden's going to make plays. Those running backs are going to make plays. Brady Cook is going to make plays. So they're going to keep them in a lot of close games. It comes back to the same thing. Can they finish? Can they win every single other game? Like what does their schedule even look like? When I was looking at it, I think they have the second easiest schedule, or maybe even the easiest schedule in the SEC. Am I wrong about that, Jake?
They have the 32nd toughest schedule, technically.
Okay,
so I believe is the easiest in the SEC.
Yeah, so it's one of the easier schedules in the SEC for sure. So I wouldn't be shocked to see Missouri in the playoffs. And I wouldn't be shocked to see Missouri with only 8 wins. I think those are two very, very realistic outcomes. But I lean more towards the playoffs. I think this team can do it. I don't know how I feel about Eli Drinkwitz yet. The jury is still out on how I feel about him. Some of the things he did, I didn't really care for, but the players seem to love him. Yeah,
it took him a little bit to get his program running because he went 5-5 the COVID year, 6-7. His first full season in 21, then 6-7 again in 22, and then obviously 11-2 last year with a win in the Cotton Bowl over Ohio State. And the first 3 years, if he had won 6 games again, I think if he was retained, we'd be talking about Eli Drinkwitz on the hot seat this year. So it just shows how fast 1 year can change, because if he wins 6 games again, they're not going to fire him. He just had an 11-win year. But I want to make sure that last year wasn't the anomaly, and that he's actually building something, because the schedule, while it might be easier because the non-conference is pretty easy, Murray State, Buffalo, Boston College, and the first SEC game is Vanderbilt before they get a bye. Like, they will be 4-0. If they're not 4-0, that's a problem. It's a major problem if they're not 4-0. And then they go to A&M. They get UMass at UMass for some reason. I don't know why they're going up to Massachusetts. And then they come home to Auburn, and then they go to Alabama. And Auburn is a team that I truly have no idea what we're going to look at this year. On the road at Alabama, I have a feeling that is going to be a tough game. I have a feeling that Kalen DeBoer is going to win that game. Bye week, Oklahoma at home, at South Carolina, at Mississippi State, home versus Arkansas. I look at this schedule, and I think that there are 9 wins on there. I think they're going to lose to A&M. I think they're going to lose to Alabama. And I think they lose to either Auburn or Oklahoma. So that is where my initial gut instinct goes. But they do get a lot of easier teams in the SEC, because Arkansas, Mississippi State, and South Carolina are not expected to be at the top of the conference. So, and especially Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt's going to be terrible once again. So if this team does not win at least 8 games, I think that's a failure on Missouri's part. Am I wrong for thinking that?
I don't think so. Sorry.
Yeah, I don't think that's too far at all.
Especially with that out-of-conference schedule. That out-of-conference schedule is a joke. Buffalo,
they go
UMass,
to
Boston
Massachusetts, though. You got to go up to the Northeast.
Have y'all seen UMass's stadium?
Yeah,
Who approved that? Who in Missouri's front office allowed their school to? I mean, I made a joke on Twitter today. Hey, Missouri fans, where are you? I want to hear you, because I've never met a Missouri fan. Obviously, they don't exist because your team is allowed to go to UMass, because you're not even going to fill that 20,000 seat stadium. I mean, that's a joke. You're an SEC school, and you're going to UMass.
So Temple and Oklahoma are doing a 2-1, but Temple at least plays in the Eagle Stadium, so it's a 65,000 person stadium. So when they do 2-1s, yeah, Temple's going to go to Norman twice, but Oklahoma is going to come to Philadelphia, and they're going to play in Lincoln Financial Field. It's not like they're taking them into basically a MAC stadium.
Right. Well,
so if they do it that way, it's so much better when you do it in that version. But I don't understand going up to UMass.
Well, and don't disrespect the MAC. That's a high school stadium. That's a Division II high school stadium. That place is a dump. I mean, there's a guy on Twitter who goes to all those stadiums, and he went there and he said, "I don't care what these pictures do; it doesn't do it justice. This place sucks." To give Missouri a little bit of credit. That's probably going to get clipped. To give Missouri a little bit of credit, Alabama did just go to Tampa to play South Florida, so I guess I'll give them a little bit of grace. But USF has a nicer stadium than UMass.
Is USF still playing Raymond James?
You
They
know what?
do for now, but I believe they're moving. They're building a stadium.
Yes, they are building a stadium. But that's what I was confirming. I was like, I'm pretty sure that's an NFL. Maybe the SID or whoever was scheduling that was like, oh yeah, Gillette Stadium, let's ride.
Playing in Foxborough.
Yeah.
Well,
maybe they are going to play it in Foxborough.
Let's check that. I'm about to check that right now, and I don't know if y'all got that feedback too. That just scared the hell out of me. Nope, they're playing at UMass's.
Yeah, no, it's
doo-doo stadium. Let me look this up. How many UMass?
The funny part is you called it a high school stadium in Texas. That's smaller than 95% of the high school stadiums here in the Metroplex.
Oh, no. It's let's see, 17,000. They don't even have 20,000 people. After they can fit 20,000 people, that would not. Yeah, a Dallas high school would fill that up. This is ridiculous. I mean, and if Missouri doesn't pack that place out, they don't exist. There's no such thing as a Missouri fan. Until I meet one of you, there's no such thing as a Missouri fan. Y'all are Sasquatch.
All right. Before we let's move on before you anger any more fan bases. Tennessee, Nico has arrived. It is time for him to take over as the starting quarterback. I feel like we've been hearing about Nico for like 4 years because his NIL deals and he was committed and all sorts of stuff. I can't even say his I am a Leva.
Lavia?
That one. I just call him Nico.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But Joe Milton was there last year. Obviously, it's now his time to take over. What is his ceiling this year? There's a lot of hype on Twitter. Could he be a Heisman candidate? To me, it's not there yet. I know he's incredibly talented. I'm just not sold on Tennessee being like a legit contender yet. I think this is not the same team from 2 years ago that had Hendon Hooker. I don't even know if it's going to be the Joe Milton because Joe Milton could throw the ball 90 yards in the air and is potentially going to start for the Patriots over Drake May because he can throw the ball from one end zone to the other. Best quarterback in shorts anybody's ever seen. But now it's Nico's turn. Want to hear your guys' thought. Am I crazy? Is Nico going to take him to the playoffs, or are we going to be 1 year away maybe?
I don't think he's a Heisman contender. I think he's going to be an excellent quarterback. I would equate his season stats. I think he can do similar to what Carson Beck did last year. And even though that got Carson Beck to New York, I don't think that.
New York.
No, you're right. But he was in the Heisman race, which I don't know why.
Talked about like he went to New York.
Right, and I don't think Nico is in that level yet, but I think he can compete. I think he's similar to Carson Beck at this time. I mean, he's going to be new. This is his first year, but the difference between him and a lot of other young quarterbacks is he is surrounded by so much older talent. Squirrel White, Brew McCoy. They bring in the Juan Thornton out of Oregon, and then you got who's the other transfer wide receiver they have? Chris Brazzell. A 6'5" guy out of Tulane. I think he's going to turn some heads in the SEC. He's a guy that can really, really play. My biggest question mark for Tennessee isn't the offense; it's the defense. But that defense is led by probably one of the best players in the country. I've said that 3 times today. So we have a lot of just about best players in the country. But in James Pierce, I think James Pierce can really get after the quarterback. He does an excellent job setting the edge. He's an all-around defensive end. He'll be a top 5 pick in the NFL draft this year. What is around him? There's a lot of big question marks. Tennessee's defensive backfield was atrocious last year. Can they take a step forward? And I think they can. I honestly have Tennessee winning 10 games this year and making it to the college football playoff. I'm not going to spoil anything. But I'm pretty high on Tennessee, unfortunately, because I've learned to not like Tennessee. It's developed. There's a Tennessee fan at my office. Shout out to Austin. When we lost to them when we ran out of time against them in the Orange Bowl.
Yeah, you don't lose, you just ran out of time.
That's right. He left a nice solid orange on my desk that I came into the next day, so I wasn't really happy with that.
Did you eat the orange?
Yes, I did. I enjoyed it. Honestly, if you're going to insult me, I'm going to at least make my belly happy.
At least give me food if you're going to insult me.
Exactly. So that was a good insult. So I can take that. But I consider it a Trojan horse. There's probably some like COVID strains in there or something. But anyway, I'm very high on Tennessee. I think Tennessee's going to be a really good team. You'll hear more about that later.
Yamaliava is how you say his last name.
I'm never going to be able to pronounce that.
I agree. I think Nico needs to have a bigger sample size, right? A bowl game against Iowa, granted, but one bowl game a career does not make. And so similar to what we've already said with some of these other teams, Jackson Arnold specifically, I need to see a bigger sample size. Offensively, they should be fine. I think William makes a great point. You look at the secondary specifically, it's a lot of youth and inexperience. They don't have a returning starter from last year's team, according to my research, in their secondary last year. And it's a lot of underclassmen, right? Very, very talented guys. But at the same time, they're going to have to take their lumps as well. That pass rush has been the key for Tennessee. They've been in the top 10 in sacks, I think, each of the last 2 seasons. And a big part of that has been James Pierce Jr. and company. They're going to have to repeat that one more time if they want to be a playoff contender this year. I lean them being a playoff contender over not. I've got them beating the Sooners in Norman, which really pissed off the Oklahoma fan base a couple months ago. But I think Tennessee's going to have to prove it early and win some of those big-time games early on in the season as a proof of concept if they're going to make it to the CFP.
Y'all heard it here first. Slide into Mitch's DMs, tweet out, we want to see Nico's sample size. Please show us your sample size, Nico. Just put it in our DMs, tweet it out. We want to see a nice shot of your sample size. Thank you. Sorry, we'll move forward.
You were saying about early for Tennessee. In week 2, they play NC State in Charlotte. Yes.
That's going to be a huge game.
He's going to go against Grayson McCall, who has been in college for what feels like an eternity.
Who has a nice sample size.
Yeah.
William's DMs must be a wild place because they're different than mine.
Yeah, I don't get those kind of DMs. I don't want those kind of DMs, so don't send me that. But he's going against Grayson McCall, who has 4 years of starting experience, a guy who moves from Coastal Carolina, goes to NC State. And NC State is being viewed as one of the potential contenders in the ACC, a team that could also be knocking on the door of the college football playoffs. And we're going to have a matchup between a quarterback making his 3rd start and a quarterback making like his 43rd start.
Yep.
So the matchup there, Nico's still young. We know he's going to make some mistakes this year, but are they going to be costly? Are they going to be the interception in the red zone, or is it going to be, it's 1st and 10 at your 40-yard line, and you basically throw an arm punt and NC State gets the ball at their own 10-yard line? What kind of mistake are we going to see? And is it something that Tennessee can recover from? Because those costly ones are the difference in them making the playoff and not making the playoff.
Yeah, and I got 2 things to add to that game. Oh, go ahead, Jake. Sorry.
I would say NC State, Oklahoma, Florida, Alabama, Kentucky, Georgia. None of those games are gimmies. None of them. Now, Florida maybe because it's in Knoxville. But if they fire Billy Napier, all bets are off, and players playing for their jobs and coaches coaching for their jobs. But we'll say for right now, it's a gimme. But I think there's 5 games in there. They've got to win 3 of them to really be in contention for the playoff. And I could see them losing 3 of them. Georgia at Georgia is basically a loss, in my opinion. If this was in Knoxville, maybe different. Alabama, you get them at home. Kentucky, you get them at home. Oklahoma on the road. Mitch, you said you have them winning. We'll see. We've got 2 young quarterbacks that'll be making their 5th starts. We don't know what we're going to get out of them. So we'll see what comes of these young quarterbacks. This secondary against teams like Georgia that Carson Beck can light up, they're going to have to improve, and they're going to have to improve quick.
Yeah, and I wanted to add, talking about the NC State game, I see Tennessee and NC State as almost the same, like doppelgangers in opposite conferences. I see them very similarly. So we're going to learn a lot out of that game. Even though Grayson McCall has one of the nicest sample sizes in college football, and Nico has a small sample size, that sample size is a Power 4 sample size against Iowa, which is one of the best defenses in the country. So we're going to see if Grayson McCall's skill set can translate. And we're going to learn a lot about both teams. And I think the team that comes out of that game victorious would be my favorite to make one of those at-large bids into the playoff.
We're going a little long here, so I want to move a little faster here. Kentucky. I did see somebody the other day say that Kentucky could be a fringe college football playoff team. I know that they bring in Brock Vandagriff, and I know they're bringing in Gavin Wimsatt, I believe is the quarterback Gavin Wimsatt from Rutgers. Gavin Wimsatt obviously started a full season at Rutgers. Brock Vandagriff sat behind Carson Beck. I'm not sold on Kentucky being a playoff team anytime soon. I like what they do. I know that they tend to play above what their ceiling is. I'm just not so sure that ceiling is right now 10 wins or 11 wins to make the playoff.
Well, they have a 2-year postseason ban that just got put on them for
okay, never mind.
Improper NIL benefits. Players were allegedly getting paid for something that they weren't actually doing. So you might get a very uninspired Kentucky team. So the person who put that hot take out, that is the hottest take, because it cannot happen.
The hot take is the NCAA overturning their own rule, which maybe they do, maybe they don't.
And that could change. But as of right now, I think, and Mitch, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't know if that's for certain yet. I don't know if that ruling has been established, but as far as I know, it is.
Yeah, has the NCAA ever actually officially passed something, or is it just kind of all smoke and mirrors until someone challenges it? I'm not sure on that as well. I do know that Brock Vandagriff wearing his cell phone on his belt buckle evidently gets Bluegrass Nation hot and bothered. So that if that's not worth
mayo and coffee doesn't.
I was about to say they have the weirdest quarterbacks ever. They also have with the hefty lefty. I mean the alumni of quarterbacks out of Kentucky are just phenomenal.
It's a great little lineup. I'll say this for Kentucky, postseason ban or not, their defense, they bring almost everybody back. That's the bread and butter of a Mark Stoops team, right? Is stuff the run, get after the quarterback, and keep it a low scoring game. Then offensively, it's pound the rock. They've had some passing success over the last couple of years, but when I think of Kentucky football, I think ground and pound. Chip Trainum comes over from Ohio State, so I think that's the known quantity on this Kentucky team. We'll see what they get out of the quarterback room. Vandagriff absolutely should be the starter. Listen, I'm a Rutgers stan. I rooted for the Scarlet Knights last year. I predicted they would get to a bowl game. I love me some Rutgers. They kind of won in spite of Gavin Wimsatt. He's not a downfield passer. He's more dangerous with his legs. So for Kentucky's offense to have any sort of balance, it'll be Vandagriff at quarterback.
I want to jump over to Arkansas.
Do we have to?
We'll go quick because I don't want to talk about Arkansas very long.
I want to call the Hogs Moose? Come on.
Sam Pittman keeps his job somehow. The speculation is that it won't be for long. He would need a pretty strong season to retain his job. And early in the season, they go to Oklahoma State. The SEC schedule is not easy for them. They do tend to play some of the bigger ones. They get Oklahoma State at Auburn, A&M in Arlington, basically Dallas, Tennessee. Last year.
This is the last year they're doing Dallas. That. Yeah, and then it goes to campuses. Thank God.
Yeah, let's stop with these neutral site games. Tennessee, LSU, Ole Miss, Texas, and Missouri. I mean, I'm not sure if they even win an SEC game this year. The schedule is brutal. Like, the question is, does Sam Pittman actually survive the season, or does he get fired mid-year?
Yeah, I think the craziest thing about their schedule is all the games that are winnable, like our fringe games, they play on the road. That sucks. And I think Sam Pittman doesn't make it out of this year, which sucks because I love Sam Pittman. He really is one of my favorite coaches. So seeing him on the hot seat like this just hurts my heart because I really do just love watching him coach. But yeah, I think he's gone.
I talked about this on our breakdown of Arkansas. I feel so bad for Arkansas fans. There are so many Razorback alum here in the DFW Metroplex, and they hype their football team up maybe more than any other team compared to the success that they actually realize. Right? I mean, they beat A&M once since this series moved to Jerry World, and you would have thought it was their Super Bowl. Not bashing them at all. It's just that's how passionate they are about their football, and when it goes bad, man, it goes bad. And this year, they've got some fun pieces like Taylon Green at quarterback. He was handpicked by Bobby Petrino out of the portal. Petrino gave him his first ever college offer when he was at Missouri State. So I love that storyline. I'm rooting for the kid. But yeah, this schedule, no matter what you think about the Razorbacks as a team, it's kind of like Florida, where they could have all the talent in the country, and this schedule is just built to wear you down. I think we put the over under of Sam Pittman's employment at Arkansas at October 1st following the A&M game in Arlington, and it was a unanimous no. He's gone at Arkansas after what could potentially be a 2-3 start with the hardest bit of their schedule in front of them.
Yeah, that Oklahoma State game, week 2, being in Stillwater is incredibly tough, especially going against arguably one of the best running backs, if not the best running back in the country, in Ollie Gordon. You get 9th-year player Alan Bowman, who somehow is still in college, and he was at Texas Tech in like 2018. I don't know how players are still here.
Should have his doctorate.
On the road at Auburn, I personally think Auburn's going to be improved from last year. I think Hugh Freeze is going to build something there, and I think that there is going to be improvement. And then obviously that A&M game in Arlington, I could see them waiting until Tennessee because they go into a bye week. Then they give the interim head coach basically 2 weeks to prepare for LSU. So for that reason, I'm going to take the over because I think it's October 6th, not October 1st, or not after the A&M game technically.
I think that's spot on. I mean, yeah, it's just tough to not see Pittman sipping pina coladas on a beach in Cabo by midseason, right? It's just tough.
Well, think about this too. If I want to play devil's advocate, maybe the boosters already know that, and that's why Bobby Petrino's there as offense coordinator without a moped or a motorcycle this time. But maybe Arkansas, they know this is going to be a bad year. Sam Pittman, maybe behind closed doors, is, hey, you know what? I'll coach this team this last year. If we do a good job, I'll keep my job. If not, I'll step down on my own. Maybe he makes it to the end of the year, and they already have their replacement right there, so they don't have to fire him early to go find a guy. So I wouldn't be shocked to see him make it to the end of the year.
I'll bet you I can Photoshop Bobby Petrino into an Arkansas head coaching uniform.
I bet you could do that really well. I would actually rather you. This is going to be a little unique, so just hang with me.
Okay.
Can you get him in the media room? Okay. With some Arkansas sponsorships behind him, with a neck brace, some road rash on his face a little bit, and just looking miserable, trying to address the media about something that could have happened with the co-ed.
Yeah, I think I'm creative enough. Yeah, I think I'm creative enough. I think I can do that. I think I can do that.
I want you to put that right next to Nico Iamaleva's sample size.
Oh no.
Okay. So I think from us, I think the legitimate playoff contenders from the teams we talked about, we have Texas for sure. I think we agree that Missouri could be a playoff contender. I think LSU could be a playoff contender. I'm not personally sold on Oklahoma, and I think we also believe that Tennessee could be a playoff contender. Obviously, you can have your opinion on Oklahoma, but is there any reason for anybody else to be considered as a legitimate playoff contender?
No, not in my opinion, Mitch.
Yeah, I don't think this year. I think you've probably got a pool of 4 or 5 teams in the SEC they're just a cut above the rest. So right now, I wouldn't add anybody to that list.
Yeah.
All right, let's move into our walk-on team of the year. William, I know you're super excited. You got really excited and almost revealed yours earlier, so I'm going to let you go first.
Yeah, I'm going to we should make t-shirts, by the way. Show me your sample size. You write that one down.
Yep, got it.
I think that would be a phenomenal merchandise.
Make sure you walk into when your kids start daycare, make sure to wear that as you go to pick up your kids.
think it would hit. Show me your sample size. I'm a statistician. Tennessee is this is why you can't have me get in front of a microphone. Tennessee is my dark horse walk-on team of the year. And I know that might not sound dark horsey, but when you put them in the SEC, they're not number one. Georgia, I think, is unanimously number one. Maybe some people might have Texas, which brings me to my next one, would be Texas at number 2, Alabama at number 3. I think more people are talking about Ole Miss than Tennessee. You have Ole Miss at 4. And then when you get past that drop-off, Missouri gets thrown in there. Tennessee might get thrown in there. So Tennessee is considered my dark horse. And honestly, after those, like we said, I think there's a huge drop-off. I don't think anyone else is going to take in to have the ability to be a dark horse, to be able to compete in the SEC. Maybe we're not talking about Auburn this week. Auburn might be one for next week. But Tennessee's mine. And one of the biggest reasons for that is they have the 52nd strength of schedule. So very easy in terms of if you compare it to their SEC counterparts. I think that changes throughout the year. That's a preseason strength of schedule. I think NC State is going to increase that strength of schedule a lot. However, I'm high on Tennessee. I think Nico's going to be able to do it. I love Josh Heupel and his ability to develop quarterbacks. I think he's done an excellent job with that and throughout his career at Oklahoma and now at Tennessee. So Tennessee's my dark horse.
Mitch, who is your walk-on team of the year out of these 8?
Man, it's gonna sound like a homer, and I don't
You
mean
took
it
my
to.
pick.
But I think it's got to be Texas A&M. I think Texas A&M and Tennessee are, to me, the two realistic picks here. Tennessee because of their strength of schedule, Texas A&M because they get all of their most difficult games at home, right? And Jake, I mean, I won't totally steal your thunder here, but getting Texas at home to end the season in a rivalry game, truly anything can happen. I mean, even if A&M was fighting for a bowl game and Texas is looking for a 12-0 season, stranger things have happened in this rivalry, right?
Especially since you have the number 1 rated hardest place to play according to the college football game.
That was a shock too. I mean, Kyle Field is difficult to play in, but as the number 1 spot, like that surprised us all, I think. Notre Dame to start the season at home. That is such a litmus test game, right? Notre Dame just lost their left tackle for the season due to a torn pectoral. If Mike Elko can put Riley Leonard, his former quarterback, in the hurt locker, I think A&M could absolutely win a rock fight and put their season on a trajectory where they win, 9 games and are in that playoff discussion. I'm not personally one that's going to take them to win 10 games in year 1, mostly because Jimbo's team didn't ever take me to that height. I need to see it before I'm fully going to buy in. But, beating Notre Dame at home, a chance to beat Missouri, LSU, those are extremely winnable games at home. I think A&M, if they can, win 2 of their 4 hardest ones in Kyle Field, absolutely, they're a team that could be a surprise come the end of the season.
Yeah, I have A&M in there too because I think Connor Wegman takes a step forward in this offense. I think Colin Klein had a lot of success offensively at Kansas State. There's a reason why Mike Elko went and got him in. And there's a reason why Colin Klein left his alma mater of Kansas State to come to A&M. That first game against Notre Dame, you talked about it. It's a huge game. There are 4 games on their schedule you talked about between Notre Dame, Missouri, LSU, and Texas, which they all get in College Station. Every single one of them. I think they win 2 of them, but like you said, I'm not going to take them 10 wins. I think they lose one of these random away games. I don't know if it's Florida. I really don't think it's Florida. I don't think it's Mississippi State. Could they fall asleep against South Carolina if they beat LSU going on the road to South Carolina? Could they fall asleep against Auburn before they go play Texas? That Auburn game to me is a massive, massive trap game. Now for Auburn, it's the same thing as right before the Iron Bowl. So same thing. Are they going to be ready? Are they going to be talking about, are the both teams going to be looking forward to the next week? So I think that South Carolina and that Auburn game are 2 to watch out for as potential letdown games. And I think they end up at 9-3, but it wouldn't shock me if we're sitting here at New Mexico State talking about them, being 8-2 and right in the thick of it for a college football playoff spot, or are they, 9-1 and they lose the last 2 games? I don't think they'll be 9-1. I think that's a little too ambitious, but I think 9-3 is a very good spot for them. And it wouldn't shock me with them being in the SEC, finishing ranked 12, 13, 14, and right on the outside looking in of this college football playoff. We're going to have basically a bubble watch all year, and I think Texas A&M is going to be squarely on it for most of the season, if I'm going to be honest.
Have you heard that storyline before, Mitch? Texas A&M on the bubble of making the college football playoff?
Once or twice. Our hated rivals are Texas, LSU, and the NCAA selection committee. So nothing new here.
You and Florida State virtual handshake.
That's right.
So we've got a couple questions here. I'm gonna skip over one of them because we kind of talked about it already. But ATX Sandman asked 2 questions. Are the Aggies being slept on? We just kind of talked about how we think they're going to win 9 games. So I'm not going to go too much into that. He also asked, will the Horns defense crack the top 100 this season? I'll let you go first on that one, Mitch.
I mean, I think they've got a chance. I love their secondary personally. They've got a bunch of talent both from the transfer portal and local high school talent that they've just groomed. I think Malik Muhammad is one of the best corners potentially in the country. If not this year, certainly next year. Cousin of Jabbar Muhammad, who's at Oregon. So yeah, I'd say I'm actually pretty happy with the Texas secondary. Like I said earlier, my concern is maybe the middle of that defensive line, but I don't have a lot of worries about Texas this year. I think they're going to be 10-2 at the worst.
Yeah, and just to jump on that too, Mitch, I want y'all to tell me when I name a top 25 offense on this schedule, okay? So if I name a top 25 offense, I want you to just yell the first word that comes to your head, okay? Colorado State.
No.
Michigan.
I mean,
UT.
You said Michigan. I guess maybe they could because
not top 25 team, but a top 25 offense.
I mean, maybe I'll say maybe.
Okay.
Yeah, depends who the quarterback is.
UTSA. Louisiana Monroe.
I don't even know who's on their team.
Mississippi State.
Will Rogers.
Oklahoma.
Quarterback, no. Oklahoma.
Oklahoma probably. Yeah, I think Oklahoma will be top 25.
There's one. Georgia.
Yes.
Vanderbilt.
Probably.
I wish.
Florida. Arkansas.
I mean, if Graham Mertz plays out of his mind, I guess maybe. Arkansas, no.
I think November 9th we see DJ Lagway. Arkansas, no. Kentucky.
No.
I think they could fringe. I don't think that they're going to – I think they'll be in like the 30s or 40s, though.
And Texas A&M.
From your lips to God's ears, Jake. Hopefully.
We'll say.
I think that there's a better chance.
There's enough fringes to give it the third. So my point to that is they're not playing any offenses that scare you. So if you're going to have a questionable defense, this is the schedule that you want. So yes, I think they do crack the top. I know there's a little bit in jest with this guy being a Texas A&M fan. However, I do think there's legitimacy to question that defense, but I do think it'll be a top 100 defense. I think it could even be top 50 with that schedule. I mean, I truly do.
I just don't understand how they had a worse passing defense than Alex Grinch last year. He was the worst defensive coordinator I've ever seen in my life, and somehow they ranked 116th, and Alex Grinch they probably improved after they fired Grinch. Let's be fair. Give USC the benefit of the doubt there, and Texas. But they weren't behind him the whole season. Other one from our friend Jake Thigpen. How serious is Mizzou as a contender? Most outlets believe they're a playoff team, but I think they have some serious holes off of last year's team that could cause them to slip up. Well, you want to take this one first?
I think they're a pretty serious contender. On a scale of 1 to 10, I'd give them a 6 or a 7. I think they have enough of that core coming back for that team to be able to compete and to make it to the college football playoff. I think the biggest thing that holds Missouri back is how good is the ACC and how good is the Big 12, because Missouri, I don't think Missouri is going to win that conference. And I don't think anybody's thinking that. So Missouri has to get an at-large bid. So there's 6 spots that are up in the air for that, right? So, 7 spots. They have to be better than the ACC runner-up, the Big 12 runner-up, the Big 10 runner-up, the Big 10 third-place team, potentially the ACC third place team, and maybe the Big 12 has another guy in there. So, like, I think Missouri can make it, but I don't think they're the issue. I think their competition is the issue. Like I said, they have the 32nd strength of schedule. It's not terrible. It's not good. I would say it's an above average, difficult schedule. I think they're a legitimate contender.
Yeah, I mean, they've got Texas A&M off that bye, right, after their what should be a 4-0 start, and that's the biggest advantage I think they have in the first half of this season. So I do think they're a legitimate contender. I think we learn a lot more after that trip down to Kyle Field. I believe that's an early game too. I think it's an 11 a.m. kick. So, you are coming off a bye, but a sleepy road early start in the SEC is never exactly easy. But yeah, I think sitting here on August the 6th, you've got to say Missouri's a contender.
Well, that will wrap it up for today's show. Mitch, we appreciate you joining us. Go ahead, let the people know where to find you guys, where to follow all of your content.
Yeah, we make it real simple. At 3Tech Pod is where you can find us: Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, Spotify, Apple, wherever you get your podcasts. We've got a Substack as well. So if you like to read college football content, you can search 3Tech Pod on Substack. We'd love to have you subscribe there as well. And yeah, man, just really, really excited for this last 3 weeks before we get to actual college football games. It was a thrill to be on with you guys, and I really appreciate it.
Yeah, and just
Absolutely.
to plug y'all's pod real quick, if you haven't checked out their YouTube, please do it. The intro into their show is absolutely phenomenal. It is one of the best intros in all of college football shows. So please do yourself a favor. If you're not even interested in college football, watch the first minute of their YouTube channel.
If they're not interested in college football, who's listening into the hour-long plus here?
Yeah, who made it to 1 hour 17 minutes on this one?
People who are really into mathematics and sample sizes. There's a lot of wackos out there who love a good sample size.
It's a variety show here. No, I appreciate it. That took me a lot longer than I'd care to admit to create, but I appreciate it.
Well, that'll do it for today's episode. We'll be back next week with the full, the other half, the eastern half of the SEC. Make our picks for the SEC championship next week. And then the following week, we actually have college football starting up. So we'll be doing season-long picks at that point. We'll be coming up here with more stuff here very soon. If you're not doing so already, make sure to follow us on social media at the Walk-On Redshirts, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. Make sure to like and subscribe to the podcast. Give us a rate if you're a 5-star listener, like William likes to say. If you're a 5-star listener, maybe you're a 4-star listener. Maybe you're a 4-star listener.
Jake, I'm going to go ahead and speak for you too. If you subscribe, we'll show you our sample size. So I'm going to speak for Jake on this. Mitch, and you know what? If you subscribe twice, Mitch might even throw his in there too.
Well, we'll talk about that.
That'll do it for today's episode. We'll be back again next week with the other half of the SEC, and appreciate everybody joining.